Alf, Pokemon card investing is officially on hold. No more sealed buys. Everybody is quitting. Everybody is getting out, right? Well, let's talk through this. I think this is a really interesting conversation because for the last 12 months, we have seen a really bullish Pokemon card market, especially on the sealed side. On the single side as well, and grading, my God, BCG card grading is at an all-time high over at PSA. And speaking of that, make sure to get $25 off your first submission over at PSA with the SCD25 code at the shipping and billing screen. Take some money off, my friends. I'm here to help you. So we've seen a pullback and we've seen some stagnation. To me, this feels really good. And to give you some context, I started buying into Pokemon cards in December of 2024. So I'm mostly a sports card guy, non-sports card guy. But Pokemon cards hadn't touched it, sealed stuff, really, outside of cards that I bought for my 10-year-old. He's into Pokemon cards. But outside of that, hadn't bought any sort of sealed stuff to put away. And I started really stockpiling it in December of 2024. And it's done pretty well. It's pulled back some as well. I'm probably up, I would guess, between like 20 and 25% right now on the stuff that I've bought. So pretty good, I think, over a 12-month span. But the one thing that the Rudy Alpha Investments type guys will talk about, and where they've always really been right here, is taking a long-term stance on this stuff. And I think that is kind of what's interesting about this space and what's really kind of given it a nice push over time. There's some good volatility there. And why is that? It's because people get out. So you do have opportunities where people are selling off a lot of their Pokemon card holdings. It's different than when you're talking about buying like the S&P, because people just buy into the S&P. And yes, does the S&P go down? Of course it does. But there's always more and more people, more and more money flowing into the S&P. Well, Pokemon is not like that. Pokemon cards is not like that. You know, people will buy it, they'll get an impulse and say, you know what, I'm going to be this Pokemon card investor, and then they will move out of it. And I think that if you're making the decision, especially for sealed product in Pokemon, you have to be taking a long-ish time view. Everyone's going to have kind of a different number as to what long-term is. For some people, that might be a year. Frankly, I don't think that's really long enough. If you want to do short-term flips, if you want to be a day trader of sealed Pokemon stuff, that's different than investing. And I think people get that confused because there's a lot of the day trading type stuff where you're buying and selling. If you're a business, this makes sense. If you're an investor, it does not really make a whole lot of sense. To me, the real play here is if you're taking a long-term view, 5, 10, 15, maybe 20 years. And 20 years sounds like an eternity. Even for me, 20 years is kind of an eternity. I mean, when you think about buying and holding something, investing. For a lot of us, you know, the S&P, it's your retirement account. So thinking about 15, 20 years, you're like, yeah, I mean, that makes sense. It's for retirement. In most cases, it's for retirement, or you're just thinking like long-term hold. It's kind of like, you know, your real estate. You buy real estate, you're holding it. If I think back 20 years ago in the Pokemon space, that would take us to what, 2005? I mean, Pokemon really got going in 98, 99. Pokemon was really fresh and new in 2005 for the most part. Now we are so many more sets into it. And the demand is still extremely high, even though, you know, maybe prices are subsiding a little bit off of these really overheated pricing that we've seen. Man, global Pokemon demand is still very, very high. We don't know what the future holds for the overall IP, but I think if you are a believer in the IP, and one thing I think is interesting too, I saw some stat that when you look at Pokemon's revenues, I think the trading card side is less than 10%. It might even be less than 5%, which is absolutely insane when you think about how big it is and how people are so focused on it here in the US. But it's a pretty, actually kind of a small part of their overall revenue. They probably make a lot more money off of their plush toys and stuff, their stuffed animals, than they do actually on Pokemon trading cards, which is wild to think about. But trading cards is not their number one revenue stream at all. So yes, it's a priority for them, but it's not everything for the Pokemon company, not at all. And so really the play here is just long-term holding this stuff. You know, the truth is, if you had started in 1999, not even with first edition packs, if you were lucky enough to still have some of those, then great. If you have unlimited packs, if you have fossil packs, you know, what were they back then in 1999? A couple of bucks, you know, $2 or $3 a pack. They're now like, you know, $150, $175, $200 for loose packs of like fossil or unlimited. That is a massive gain. And yes, I know we're talking about 30 years later, but that is a tremendous gain. When I think about sports card packs in comparison. Sure, there are some from the 90s, the late 90s that are very expensive now, but there's a lot that are not, that were widely distributed. But those Pokemon packs were also widely distributed. And the demand is still really high for those. That's not even getting into the Neo stuff, the early 2000s stuff. The print runs might be less and so forth. I mean, if you did nothing but just buy packs as like souvenirs and throw them in a closet over a 20-year period, you would be doing really well compared to a lot of traditional investment markets. You would be doing really well. Nobody foresaw that, or I guess everybody would have done the same thing. There are people that did do that and are cashing in now. And so what's happening now is we have people that are kind of doing similar stuff, but with the modern products, with the ultra modern products. Now, do we have a guarantee that the ultra modern products, let's say Sword and Shield, like 2020 forward over the last 5 years, that stuff is going to age the same way that some of the older stuff does? We don't have that guarantee. Absolutely not. The print runs are a lot higher. They're a lot higher. If you go back to, what was it, early 2000s? I'm trying to remember the set. What was it going back to like 2020? Maybe it was like Darkness Ablaze. Anyway, they went from like 2 to 3 billion cards a year to now they're at like 9, 10 billion cards, 11 billion cards a year. It's a pretty dramatic increase in print runs. Some might say, well, you know what? Print runs, they could be 20, 30 billion cards a year in 5, 10 years to make these print runs actually look a little scarce in comparison. That might be true. Demand could subside on this stuff as well. Demand could subside on Pokemon to where they're like, you know what? We don't need to print 10 billion cards a year. Let's print 5 billion cards a year. That's the stuff that could happen. I think everybody assumes that, demand just keeps on going up on certain things. Maybe it will and maybe it won't. But I think that what still kind of maintains is the IP is really strong. And to me, just my own opinion on this, just my opinion, not financial advice, I feel like it's pretty safe, especially I buy booster boxes, sealed booster boxes, and I just hold those. And I'm not sitting here on, $1 million of booster boxes, but I feel like overall for me and what I'm doing, I like to just buy booster boxes, sit them in there, let them just kind of sit and fester. I don't think that the reprints are always going to be booster boxes. They might reprint products, of course. A product might still be in the reprint window, but it's not going to necessarily be a booster box. It'll be some other ancillary product. And so that's where I think booster boxes, especially when you look at the sealed Pokemon space, I think you got to stick to, in my opinion, again, stick to what's tried and true. And booster boxes are popular as kind of a buy and hold. They even have cool acrylic cases for them and stuff. To me, the actual box itself is a collectible. It's kind of similar to action figures that are sealed action figures that I've got a bunch of them from the 80s. Here's an example, Masters of the Universe He-Man figure from the 80s. What makes this so great for me is the card back. This brings me right back to Toys R Us, to Kmart in the 80s, where these were for sale, and it brings back that nostalgia. The artwork, that's on the actual packaging is a collectible in itself. And I think the same thing goes for Pokemon cards. With sealed Pokemon products, there's a nostalgia factor, there's an appreciation for the art, appreciation for the design. I know it sounds kind of cheesy maybe for people that don't know this space, but there's something to the actual packaging that the stuff came in. You're seeing it with sealed video games, you're seeing it with sealed action figures, sealed stuff. Sealed Apple iPhones, original iPhones go for huge money. Anything that has kind of like that historical significance, pop culture historical significance, and has a nostalgia effect to it. There's sealed Super Nintendos that sell for huge money. And I think that with Pokemon, it's similar to that. And the singles market itself is extremely popular as well. So I don't want to take away from the singles market, from people that are buying, holding, investing in singles, Pokemon singles, especially on the vintage side. Man, I think that there's a lot of underpriced Pokemon singles on the vintage side. The modern stuff, the ultra modern and kind of the cool SIRs and all that stuff, they're getting a lot of attention for sure. And there's rarity attached to it. And I get all of that. But there's also just vintage cards of those characters that I think are going to age really well. So Pokemon investing on hold for a lot of people right now, reassessing, trying to figure out what comes next. But I think that Pokemon as an IP as a whole is going to continue to truck on in the years to head. And I'm actually thinking beyond the 30th anniversary, because I keep hearing this, man, like, oh, 30th anniversary, 30th anniversary. I'm thinking more about 50th anniversary for Pokemon and what that is going to look like in 20 years and holding it for another 20 years and seeing what that stuff looks like on the 50th anniversary of Pokemon and leading up to that. Because again, when I look at young people today, the one thing that you always want to look at is, well, is the next generation interested in this stuff? And for Pokemon cards, the answer is an emphatic yes. That next generation is getting into Pokemon. They're collecting them now. What does that mean? Well, they're going to grow up and they're going to hit their midlife crisis like we all are. And they're going to go back and look at those nostalgic things from their past. And how many more sets will have come out in 20 years from now on the Pokemon card side? A lot. So the stuff now, maybe it ages well, maybe it doesn't, but I really like this stuff as a buy and hold long term. Short term flips and day trading for sealed Pokemon is not my thing. If it works for you, great. But for me, I'm really excited to see what this stuff does long term. All right, friends, stay healthy, stay awesome, and I will talk to you again later.